Hello and welcome back to the High Speed Snail channel. As my camera is still not functioning and I don't have any video footage for you, I decided to do something a little different. Now, Heiss in his channel has Tales from the Shop. Um, Lawrence Rose with his LMM slash Lawrie Goes Loco channel has Chasing Dinosaurs. And, well, rather than tread upon any of their actions, I decided, okay, well, let's do something similar but a little different. I have extensive experience with steam equipment of all types, including railroads, and so I decided to title this Tales from the Roundhouse because, well, that's where it comes from. In the olden times, a lot of times, especially during winter, crews would be huddled around stoves or locomotives in the roundhouse and just talking. Not really on duty, not really off duty, not when you go home. Crews that had been called up, their train isn't ready yet. Ones that have finished their run but don't exactly want to go home to the wife and hear those complaints. They just sit around and talk. And the crews that are in the roundhouse, the maintenance crews, if they have nothing that's going on specifically and they're clocked out, they'd sit around and talk as well. So to that end, here's some of my experiences about working with steam railroads, steam equipment, such like that. And given the time of year and that I'm in North America, we have snow up here. About a third to a half of the country gets snow over the winter, for those of you that aren't in America. And I'm in part of it that does. Uh, Actually, we get around 10 feet of snow cumulatively a year. Not all at once, not 10 foot high, so we have to climb out a second story window or anything like that. But throughout the winter, we do get about 120 inches. Used to average around 140, but it's down to about 120 these days. 120 inches of snow in a year. And so when you do that, I mean, Lawrie just recently had his Ruston out in the snow in East Anglia now. I understand that part of Britain doesn't see snow very often, so that was something unique for him. But for me, snow trains, winter operations, this is not uncommon. It's not common because there's various difficulties with steam equipment in the snow. A lot of them. I've frozen my hands and feet way too many times, and so have difficulty in the cold anymore. But that's another matter, and that's quite common for farmers and railroaders of old, things like that. An individual asked me, well, what do you do to get ready for snow train operations? Well, it really starts when you lay up the locomotive for the year. If you're planning on running it in the wintertime, now everybody has their own different processes and different mechanisms, different protocols for laying up a steam locomotive for overwinter. To me, they're a little different than if you're going to lay it up over winter and not worry about it. That's one thing. If you're going to lay it up and then try to operate it at some time during freezing temperatures, that's another. There's certain little differences that could or would occur. One of the main differences is how you lay up the boiler, because you don't want any deterioration to happen over winter. Now, some people do this just as a matter of course. But again, if you're doing snow train operations, if you're doing operations in freezing or sub-freezing temperatures, let's say that for our international friends, because 0 Fahrenheit is different than 0 Celsius. If it's 0 Fahrenheit, yeah, it's cold. If it's 0 Celsius, as long as there's no wind, you're fine, more or less. And I've operated in both. It gets real fun and real interesting. But to that end, laying up the boiler is very, very worthwhile, even doing this for, just storing it. One of the protocols that I've learned and tend to prefer, now each place has different ideas on what to do, what not to do. I usually let it get down to about 10 pounds of pressure and then blow down the boiler. Open up every valve you can, once it's down to like 5 pounds. If it's a locomotive, you're already chained, everything like that. So the drivers are chained. Cylinder cocks are open. Reason why you do this is so that all the valves don't, what we would call freeze. It's a contraction issue. Once most of the water's out of the boiler, you don't fill the boiler up like you would for just putting it away overnight. So you have water to start up in the morning. You literally want every drop out of it, and you want it to do it while the boiler's still warm, so it'll dry itself out. There's still a lot of heat in the wrapper sheets around the firebox, in the outer shell of the boiler, because it's insulated as well. So you won't have as much of an issue with uh, um, water oxidizing the metal when that occurs. So blow it all down. Once you have limited or no pressure in the boiler, open up all the valves. Why do you do that? Well, even if it's a water valve or steam valve, if you've ever shut off a valve when the boiler's hot and try to open it back up when it's just cooled down to atmospheric temperature, you'll find a lot of them are stuck. That's because metal contracts when it cools. And that's just between operating temperature of, say, around, say, 100 degrees Fahrenheit would be about normal temperature for an external valve on the boiler during operation. And it gets down to atmospheric temperature, say 60 or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, I'm in North America. Deal with it, international folks. We still use Fahrenheit. But even that will seat a valve very, very tightly if it's seated tightly when you shut it off. Now, take that to another exponent. You're down to, say, freezing, 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It's actually 32, but say you're down to 30 degrees Fahrenheit from 50. That's that much tighter that valve becomes in the frozen temperatures. So it gets to be an issue with that. So I just open up all the valves, not like full open wide, anything like that, but just open enough so that it's not going to stick during the sub-zero weather, below freezing weather. And that includes, drain the water out of the tender tank. This gets to another factor that I'll get onto in a moment because I think I'm running out of time. Anyway, another factor is what kind of fuel does the locomotive have? Is it an oil burner? Is it a coal burner? Is it a wood burner? Now, wood burners are very uncommon still, but they do still exist in certain regions, certain areas, especially for very historic locomotives, which I don't know why you'd be operating a lot of them out in the winter, but presume that you have that issue. What happens, and what has happened in the past, is that oil that goes in a locomotive is not like motor oil in your car. That's fairly runny even at lower temperatures. It's not like diesel fuel that's very runny even at lower temperatures, although diesel fuel can indeed gel. The normal fuel for steam locomotives tends to be, these days, or at least when I was operating, for a standard gauge oil burning locomotive, was bunker oil. Think of it like somewhere between ketchup and cheap pancake syrup. Wasn't exactly runny, wasn't exactly solid. Now, the lower temperatures, you get more towards the semi-solid part, more like ketchup. And once you get down to around freezing, it stops being ketchup. It goes from between peanut butter to actual stick butter, which then poses a problem. There's a story about that that'll be coming up shortly. So when you lay up the locomotive in fall, you'll want to put, if you have an oil burner, fill up the oil tank right then and there. That way you have enough for overwinter. There's issues about that. Like I said, it'll turn into somewhere between butter and peanut butter with colder temperatures. And so if you have that in a tank car, your pump isn't going to want to pump it into the tender tank, into the oil tank on the tender. I'm going to stop this part here and we'll continue on shortly.